And ultimately, we have no choice. There is no other choice other than investing in our kids, because they're stepping in when we step out. You can say college, career ready, all these things, but bottom line is it's the future. So
Hello and welcome to Office Hours. We're so excited for the Estacada School District to participate in the podcast platform. It's called Office Hours because I am Superintendent Ryan Carpenter of the Estacada School District, and I am so proud to bring together a new podcast giving our community the opportunity to really dig deep transparently into the great things happening in your great school district, as well as some of the hot topics and big issues that our school district is working through in order to best serve our community. You know, so often when you look on Facebook and other social media platforms, there's a lot of comments, a lot of opinions. And the whole purpose of this podcast is to make sure that as many people in our community are in the know as possible instead of in the gossip. And so we're here today and for the following future to give everybody in our community the opportunity to truly have a deep understanding of what we're trying to accomplish inside this great school district. We're here on this podcast platform today also because we have learned from the last presidential election and through many other data points that the podcast is where a lot of people are starting to receive their regular and daily news feeds. In order for us to continue to be innovative and reach out with best-in-class communication to our community, we are here on this platform and so excited to be a part of it. So please make sure to subscribe. Please find ways to continue to stay in the loop when it comes to this podcast process, because we're so excited to share the greatest and latest information with all of you. Thanks so much for being a part of the Office Hours today with your superintendent. Let's get right after it.
Looking for a job with a consistent schedule and a real impact? Estacada School District is hiring. We're looking for school bus drivers and substitute cooks to support our students. These roles offer flexible hours, paid training, and the chance to be a part of something meaningful. Whether you're experienced or just looking to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. Apply today at estacadaschools.org and help keep our schools running strong.
So today we're going to get right into it. And in our first ever podcast, one of the things that is extremely controversial nationwide is really the Department of Government Efficiency. And it doesn't matter if you watch Fox News or you watch CNN. One of the hot topics is really outside people looking at government waste, government fraud, government expenditures, and communicating those things transparently to the American citizens. Well, just like you, I'm equally intrigued in this topic, and I know so many people in our community who are watching the national news and either agree or disagree with what Elon Musk and the DOGE team is doing. You probably are thinking, yes, I see all of this national waste and fraud and this controversial hot topic, and how does that correlate to the Estacada School District, another governmental agency, and how we spend your taxpayer dollars? And so I thought the first most fun topic we could possibly do on this podcast is to DOGE the Estacada School District. And so today, our first guest, we are joined by Executive School Board Member and Director Joe Burman. Joe, we're so excited to have you a part of this first podcast, and it's great to have you on board. I know you. I've known you for years. You've been a great school board member who has really done tremendous oversight of our school district. But tell us a little bit about what motivated you, and tell the people what motivated you to serve as a school board member, and let them get to know you just a little bit.
Well, first, thanks for having me, Superintendent Carpenter. Season 1, Episode 1.
Here we go.
What can go wrong?
Exactly.
But yeah, thanks for having me. It'll be an interesting topic. Obviously, federally, we're still, there's information, but not locked in, detailed information that makes its way here. So it'll be fun to talk about how we deal with it here locally.
Yep.
As far as background, we had a fun conversation just the other day on what makes you a full-timer here or not new.
Yeah.
And I'm on my 21st year in Estacada. So I actually don't know if that makes me full-time here yet or not. or if it takes 6 months, 40 years, or 100 years. But moved out here 21 years ago, probably for the same reason most people that come here ultimately arrive here. Is at the time it was getting back into the country where I came from. I grew up in Beaver Creek, lived 1 year in Clackamas and hated it. I had to get out.
Why did you hate it?
Well, I think the third or fourth month, things were getting stolen out of my garage. And I was like, okay, I'm not made for town.
Yes.
Clackamas is town to me. So ultimately came out here to visit some family, found a place up in the George Loop, and we moved immediately and started laying roots out here. So.
And you are a graduate of Colton High School. So really, even though you've been in the community for 21 years, you're really born and raised in this area. What gravitates you to continue to raise your family and live here? Yeah,
sure. Fun fact on graduating from Colton. That was a long time ago, 1997. But I also attended Estacada High School.
No kidding.
That last year of high school. Colton, unfortunately, didn't have some advanced math classes, and of course, Estacada did. So I got to drive here every day and start meeting people in the school that I still know today, actually, that are in this community. So had a great time. I actually got to participate in the graduation here and do all the fun stuff. But ultimately, what brought me back here was getting back into the country, getting some space. It was affordable.
Yeah.
Probably the same reason we're getting the growth now is it's doesn't seem affordable to me, but it's affordable for people coming out to start their families. But big motivation just to get out of that, the theft and the busyness of just living in Clackamas. I know that's not the big city, but that was enough for me.
Yeah, well, it's a big city to our community for sure, no doubt about it. And it's also awesome to hear that even though you went to Colton, you're truly a product of the Estacada school system as well, at least when it came to the advanced math coursework. I want to talk a little bit more about George too, because for our community, you may not be aware, but the George community is what we refer to it as, or the Loop for the local people. That's such a beautiful area inside our school district that just has some amazing people there. What would you say was like one of your favorite things about living in that area?
Honestly, I love the elevation. Winter was winter, actually.
Yes.
Great community. I was kind of close to the fish hatchery, so there'd always be, salmon cookouts down there with some of the neighbors, and I love the community of it. Your neighbors are always there to help you out. Lost power all the time, so we all took care of each other that way.
For sure.
And my kids loved it.
Yeah.
We had creek and a pond, and most of the time they were there.
Yeah.
And they still give me a hard time about moving from there. But about 10 years ago, we moved out of the George Loop, and it was about the time youth sports started in our family.
Yeah.
And the drive, it's 30 minutes to anything.
Yes.
Gas, food, not groceries, but just food.
Yeah.
And then coming here back and forth for practices, commuting from work and then practices. And then I got into some youth football coaching, and it's like, okay, this is a little too far out for me for our time of life.
Yeah.
So,
well, and if you're a car sick person, it's a very windy road too. It's not like it's a straight road to anywhere. Yeah. It's an amazing place for sure. And one of the things I wanted to point out that I think is cool is, the community of George has always had strong advocacy inside our school district. And, when Director Burman lived there, it had school board representation then. We also had school board of director Will Johnston, who also lived in that same community. And so the George community has always been a deep part of our school district and has always had representation on our school board to make sure that its values were represented as well.
Yeah, and also funny story, Director Johnston is the one that bought my home.
Bought your house. So it's almost a prerequisite that if you buy that house, you must be a school board member.
Yeah, you have to live in the loop in the same house.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, it's a beautiful area, and we love our George community, and such a cool spot to be. Well, of course, we're here today to really talk about DOGE and government efficiency and waste and fraud and all of the fun topics that the whole entire country is talking about today. And so I was hoping you could maybe talk a little bit about, how you as a school board member really oversee the school district's finances and just kind of how you use a lens. But I guess before that, I think it's important to talk about kind of your qualifications and credentials. Aside from being a board member, you're actually quite successful. Like, tell us a little bit about like what you do for a living, and because I think it's amazing.
Well, I'll do what I can, but to go back to build up to that, though, one of the reasons I wanted to serve on the school board or get involved, I think it's the same for everybody initially, is your kids are getting ready to go into this system.
Yep.
And you want to be involved, or you can coach. There's so many things you can do, volunteer, coach. But the skills I had at the time were better suited for business management or construction management or those types of things. But ultimately, the reason to get in is to be involved in how my kids are educated.
Yeah.
When you start, you think you can go be in a classroom and change rules, and you can just change everything. But obviously you learn along the way that your job is fiscal responsibility, policy enforcement or policy approval or modification, and finally carrying out our strategic plan that our community helped develop with us. So it evolved to that, but started as a desire to be involved with my kids' lives more, right? So, but as I got onto the board, I started out volunteering on budget committee, and I was kind of tapped on the shoulder by the chair of the board at the time. And then he ultimately retired right around the time Marla was hired.
And who was that?
Mark Green.
Yeah, great school board member, longtime school board member.
So kind of his last thing he did was get Marla on board, and he retired. I think he served well over a decade on the board. And his retirement got me an appointment after serving a year on the budget committee to kind of learn how the district works. And budget committee was great. Ultimately, you're approving a tax rate on that committee, not really anything else other than how it was formed and what tax rate we used for that. But ultimately got appointed by the board, some of which are still board members today.
So cool.
Great group of people, and it's stayed pretty consistent over the years. So as time went by, serving as a board member, I had more reasons to be involved with the board. One, I really enjoyed working with the board and working with district leadership, or ultimately you as our single employee. But then I started a business in 2018. And got to pay more taxes.
You did.
Cat tax specifically.
Which we are so thankful for. Thank you for your contribution.
There's a lot of local people that pay it, and it's going towards good things. But it was more motivation to make sure we're being fiscally responsible. Spending it where we need it, focusing on the right systems, the right facilities, the right people. So the motivation actually evolved over time. So, so start to finish to current, those are the reasons I enjoy serving on the board.
That's awesome. And so this business that you created, which I think is just amazing. And by the way, it's the headquarters of this, awesome new thriving business that you've started, that you talked about, is headquartered in Estacada, which I think is amazing. But what is that business? It's super cool.
It's a very unique business. I'm really thankful to work with some great people. We've got kind of a whole, diverse group of type of skills in this business. We have electricians, through apprenticeship, through journey level, machinists, millwrights, carpenters, and we've managed to put all these groups of people together to form an integrated solution provider type business to the aerospace industry. We worked really hard. It took 2 years to get an AS9100 certification, which qualifies us to do aerospace type projects. Really small number of small businesses that actually have that because it's quite an investment. But over time, it's allowed us to be uniquely qualified to work on some great defense projects that protect our country 24/7. So like the district, the business is only as good as the people there and the quality of people. And
yes.
I'm thankful to have a great group of people that I get to work with.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And when you tell me about your work, like it's just so fun to hear just some of the cool partnerships that you have and the types of things you do to defend our country, which is amazing. And when you talk about your employees, obviously we care so deeply about local folks. And I know that you work closely with our CTE programs. I mean, talk a little bit about who you're hiring and the type of people that are helping you.
Yeah. Early on, when we're mostly electrically focused, several of our apprentices came from Estacada.
Yeah.
It started with Alice Ambresco bringing us in to do talks about trades.
Yes.
And some of those kids ultimately became employees, ultimately got into the apprenticeship programs, and are now almost journey level workers.
Yeah.
So great feeder program. Recently, we've invested in some robotic welders. So we're jumping into the future on technology and, kids that know how to use their hand-eye coordination or play a lot of video games or use iPads, it's right up their alley. So we're looking forward to using some of that new equipment to help with the CTE programs here in the future.
Yeah.
As a trainer or a show and tell or a way to create a path to another career for somebody here. Yeah,
and electrical engineering is such a really popular thing that kids want to be a part of. There's just so much need and demand in that industry. And Alice Ambresco, as you referred to, is our college and career coordinator at Estacada High School. And she does such a fantastic job of really trying to put kids together with their strengths and what industry is needing and college opportunities. And so just a great example of how, a program at the high school is ultimately feeding a really cool business and industry that's there. Yeah. This definitely makes you a very qualified person to have on our first show today to talk about government waste and fraud and expenditures and all of the above. And so can you tell us a little bit more about, because of those qualifications and because you run your own, big business and work with, a ton of governmental contracts and that kind of stuff in the business that you run, like how do you then as a school board member come in and what lens do you use to make sure that your local school district is being ethical and using money correctly? And you talk about the CAT tax and all the money that your business as well as you are personally, pouring into your local schools. I mean, what's kind of your routine in terms of just overseeing the district's finances as a school board member?
Sure. My first and biggest observation is that our school district does a much better job than private industry at looking at how we spend, the different layers of approval, who's involved, signature authority, ultimately the committees we use to make these decisions. Yeah. I've found over serving on this board over a decade, there's more gates in place in this school district than I've seen in private industry.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Sure. Well, here in our district, and you can help dial me in on the numbers, but we've got a couple layers of approval. So to kind of open with the scale it, what's our revenue per year? 43 million?
47 million.
47. I know it changes a lot based on students and tax rate.
And grants and that kind of stuff. Yep.
Yeah. And so as a board, we've got this first layer of $10,000 or less that does not need a board approval. And I start with saying, the size of our business, the Estacada School District is a $40 million business.
Yep.
And to give our CEO, our single employee, the authority to spend $10,000 on an emergency or a small item or a small mechanical, whatever it may be. Maybe you can give examples of what you spend that on, but we don't ask for approval on that.
Right.
So there's the $10,000 level, spend what you need.
Yep.
Next layer, $150,000 requires board approval.
Yep.
And in most cases, those types of projects or needs or curriculums or whatever it may be are built of a committee of people.
Yeah.
Say it's a new facility that we can have PE class and host sports and soccer and football. And there's a committee of operational people from the district, other stakeholders, just depending on the topic.
Yeah.
You fill the room with stakeholders, the right decision makers, the subject matter experts, and ultimately there's a board member on most of those committees most of the time that I'm aware.
Yes.
And that triggers like a 3-quote process. And I want to touch on that a little bit too, but a 3-quote process that comes through this committee. This committee interviews vendors or contractors, makes group decisions. It's all documented. These decisions ultimately come as a recommendation from a committee up to the board, and they're approved or disapproved. And we have plenty of time to discuss them during board meetings, outside of board meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the $10,000 rule, which I think is, a critical rule, because allowing the district to be able to spend no more than, $10,000, we still communicate these things, but examples of that would be, hey, we need to buy, 400 light bulbs because during winter break, we need to just change light bulbs in classrooms and that kind of stuff. And, or, another example is, during the summertime or during winter break, we have to change every filter in every heater in every classroom. And, for us to be efficient, when we talk about, governmental efficiency, like those are the things we just need the authorization to do, to like, just go do it. Like, let's make sure our kids have what they need. If that's school supplies, if that's whatever, let's make sure our facilities are ready to accommodate the needs of our folks. Even filling up a bus, as we look at gas prices, to fill up a bus is a $300 or $400, each time thing. And we need to just be able to efficiently, fill up our buses with diesel so that we can safely take the kids on the next one. But again, any penny over $10,000, that actually requires us to get 3 quotes from different vendors. And I know a lot of community members, have asked questions over, your time on the board, as well as my time serving as superintendent, about, how do we process like even those 3 quotes if it's between 10,000 and 150,000. And I think it's a good conversation for us to talk about, is just how we kind of select this process. And I'm not talking about the RFP process, which we'll talk about here in a second, but really when we're going to buy a lawnmower to mow the fields, or we're going to purchase window blinds for every single classroom in one specific building, and that equals $10,000. Or maybe even a better example is, we need to repaint some things this summer. Our weight room is something that is honored by Steve Woods, another longtime school board member, and just rock star of the history and tradition of the school district. And we want to make sure the building that has his name on it, looks great. But to paint that building is going to cost $16,000. And so in order for us to make that purchase, we need to, have 3 different companies give us quotes. And, it's always, it's the usual mantra that we always select the lowest bidder, but we do, consider, local companies, because we know how important it is for our community to, hire local and support local. But we also need to be mindful of quality of job. And I know, when we talk about bonds and when we talk about big construction, like, we're always asked, how can we do it as cheap as possible, or what corners can we cut in an ethical way to try to keep the cost down. But there are some things that, Farmer Bob, can't just come and do for $8 and that kind of stuff. We have to do prevailing wage. And,
spending the taxpayer's dollar isn't always cheap to do, right? You have to follow laws. You have to follow prevailing wage rules. You have to follow BOLI. And that can actually turn away the local contractor on a small size project. Where, if you ask me to come give you a quote to paint something for $15,000, well, I'd have to consider I've got to make sure I'm signed up with BOLI. I got to make sure I'm doing prevailing wage. I got to make sure I pick the right category of painter for the right experience, and most likely change their pay scale just for this job.
Yeah.
And then have the back office reporting to prove that I did it right.
Right.
And I think sometimes that can limit our bidders pool.
Yes.
Not all small businesses or a person in a van who has a trade skill want or know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
So we've been in several situations where we just couldn't get 3 quotes in the district.
Right.
I tend to believe that that's a contributor, as there's a back end workload that you can't always charge for.
Yeah.
It can make you not competitive as well.
Right.
So it would make sense that it's tough to get full quotes back for the smaller projects without going outside of our great community.
Right. Yep. And that's the tricky part too. And like you're saying, and sometimes our jobs, like to paint it as $16,000, like in some companies, that job is so small that, bigger companies, will just basically pass it over because of all the work that's required in order to jump through the legal hoops.
Parents, is your student registered for the new school year? Don't wait. Registration is now open for all grade levels in Estacada Schools. And the earlier you register, the better we can prepare for a great start. Early registration helps us plan class sizes, staffing, transportation, and more for a smooth start to the upcoming school year. Visit estacadaschools.org and go to our enrollment page to get started. It only takes a few minutes and makes a big difference.
So Ryan, another question for you. When you're getting these requests or big project ideas in the district, what do you consider, what does your team consider before putting a project or request like this together?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And the first topic that comes to mind, because, as we talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, I know there are some in this community that see our investment in turf athletic fields as waste. And I just want to share, how we kind of go through those processes. And first of all, because those types of things are extremely expensive, the number one thing we do is we look to see where help is when it comes to grant funding or private donations to see if we can offset, if not outright pay for the whole entire thing. And when it comes to the baseball and softball fields that were just recently turfed this winter, we were successful in getting a major community alliance grant, which is a national foundation. We applied for it and we won. And that ultimately offset the cost of 60% of the entire project. And so, my ability to come to the board to say, hey, we have playoff games being rescheduled to the community of Sandy because the referees and the OSAA deems our football field as unsafe. We have circumstances where we have so much growth in our community, we can't even allow our youth programs to play on the baseball field or softball field or the football field because it's going to wreck it for high school sports, or we don't have lights. And so as soon as it gets dark, we have limited capacity. And so as I come to you with the problems we're trying to solve, I'm also coming to you with here's where the help is to help offset those costs. I think about, if you're in your own house and your roof costs $100,000 and the roofing company says to you, hey, we can pay for 60% of this roof if you can just come up with the other 40%. Like at some point you have to think to yourself, like, this is a great deal. And I'd be crazy not to find a way to look at the, cans in my couch cushions or things of that nature to just find a way to make that 40% happen. And when it came to the softball and baseball turf fields, like that was our opportunity, is 60% of this is paid for. Can we find the other 40%? And we got some private donations from the Estacada Community Foundation. We got some private donations just from people writing a check. And so ultimately the district, through the purchase of gravel and through excavation, we were able to lay, a beautiful facility that's going to allow all kids in our community to have the opportunity to play on safe, modern, and it will exceed the capacity to allow more kids to practice on it at all weather situations, ultimately bringing a big win to this community as a whole. So that would be an example. And I only bring that up because I know it's a hot topic of some people. I mean, there's a lot of people who are like, that was the best idea you've ever made. And I've heard that before too. But we know there's others that are like, why in the heck did you spend the money on that when you could have spent it on, this specific project? And I completely understand that. But this grant was for this. It was our opportunity to jump on it. It's been a long-term plan of our school districts to execute that. But that would be my example of, the question you ask and how we work through that process.
And I've found in a lot of our Q&As when projects come up to the board level, if it wasn't like a turf field kicking in money, it was the Energy Trust of Oregon.
Yes.
Or other state or federal agencies that help with some of the other projects as well.
Yeah.
So do you have someone that's like full-time grant searching, or is it by topic typically?
We do not. You talked earlier about our, ability to run lean and mean. And so really it's just by topic and by expertise. And so in this case, we had a director of operations that, had this come across our email inbox, and he personally spent several hours himself writing the grant. He's not a technical certified, grant writer, and he put it in there and we were able to win it, which gave us that opportunity. And I think, this, but I think our community would be surprised at how many grant funds we actually get in our award. I'm
thinking about a couple projects like seismic.
Absolutely.
Grant.
Yes.
Sports stadium over there.
Yes.
Grant money.
Yeah.
And more importantly, huge community.
Yes.
Input.
And a ton of, the football field was a great example of that.
On these things.
Yeah. And that was an example where we just had a ton of people who volunteered to drive their dump truck to haul the dirt out of the football field to make sure we could make it level and safe. We just had so much community support when it came to that. And you talk about the seismic grants, that's a specific grant from the state of Oregon that really tries to make buildings more sound in the event of that, major, earthquake that's going to come maybe in the next 5 minutes or whatever else. But, River Mill received a $1.5 million grant, and we were able to change the walls, change the fixtures, change, the electrical plugins at River Mill. And if you were to walk into one of those classrooms right now, like it's a beautiful classroom, and that came through grant funding. We're about to start this summer a $2.2 million project on the high school main gymnasium. Well, I'm sure you're saying, well, there he goes on sports again. But it's important to note that our main gym is the central for the American Red Cross in the event of any type of catastrophic emergency for our community. It also serves as a cooling shelter in the summertime for our community members that are unable to escape the heat, as well as it serves as a multi-athletic purpose. And we have church services in there and other things from our community rentals. And so our ability to spend $2 million to make sure that that structure is sound and safe for all of the community to use, and we're not spending $1 on that.
It's just
that
a great example.
Project.
This district really stretches the dollar.
Yes.
Great stewardship.
Yeah. And so it's been a lot of fun to work through, and we're not done yet. But I think in your 10 years, certainly in my 7 years serving as your superintendent, I think we're up to $6.5 million of grants received. And so, I know a lot of community members are like, well, why don't you just go get a grant for that? Well, we are. We literally are getting a lot of grants to help support this work.
It seems like a first stop as soon as there's a need is sounds like what grant can we get to offset this?
Yep. That's exactly right. And who can help?
Right.
And we get audited every single year on any type of bid or purchase over $10,000 from a third-party auditor. And they really look at that paperwork of, what prevailing wage was presented. And then they look at the business's back end to guarantee that those wages were fulfilled, which just makes it a cumbersome but also transparent and ethical process. But I hope that at least, answers, some of the people who are confused about, well, I have a buddy, that could paint this house for, $8,000. And it's like, well, but they're not registered in the Better Business Bureau. They don't have a number. They're not bonded. These things. And so we can't even legally, go through that process. And I know that our community also, as much as they, have a point of emphasis of us trying to really maximize their taxpayer dollars on things like that, they also equally count on us to be legal and ethical and all of those things as well. And so it does put us in a tricky spot, but we do, always want to make sure that we're following those laws and guidances. And your role as a school board member really kind of oversees and ensures that work and that policy and that law is being followed.
Yeah, the other side of our small business here in Estacada is we are an electrical contractor. That's kind of our roots.
Yeah.
And it evolved into this other work, but we're working for Portland Public Schools right now on a multi-year project. And I've had to assign a full-time person to the reporting side.
Just to do the paperwork.
To work for PPS. Goodness.
Yeah.
Who passed a bond.
Yes.
I wish we could, but
we'll get there.
We will get there. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And we even have to adjust our folks' pay to be at those rates.
Yeah.
Some go up, some go down, but it's full-time reporting. It's monthly reporting with time cards, with pay stubs.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work.
Yeah, no doubt. And then when we get to the threshold of $150,000, I mean, that is when it becomes big money. And some examples of that is if we have to replace a broken boiler, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the boiler, by the way, is what provides heat to our students and our staff during the cold winter months. Another example of that is contracts. We have a contract with a major company called Waxy, and they ultimately, provide the toilet paper, the hand soap, the cleaning supplies, and those contracts exceed $150,000 over the year. And so when we're over $150,000 in an expenditure and or a contract, we have to go through a formal RFP process. And can you share a little bit about how the district and your experience as a board member has kind of gone through those processes and how we vet out to make sure that the taxpayer is getting their money's worth in these?
Yeah, sure. So ultimately a statement of work is developed and it's sent out to qualified bidders. And sometimes that can be hard to find. And the pricing exercise begins. Pricing comes back. It runs through that committee we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's packaged up, brought to the board, and really, and there's board participation in that committee, of course. But what we want to know as a board that we hold you accountable for is what is the return on investment, or a better way to ask is how does it impact student outcomes, which are priorities, or how does it align with the strategic plan?
Yep.
And so we put that back on you to make sure we're making a good decision.
Yep. And I think that's a great segue to really talk about the role of superintendents when it comes to, waste, fraud, and abuse, and maximizing, every penny of the taxpayer's dollar. And so, as the school district and your superintendent, which, by the way, the superintendent is the school board's one single employee. I work and represent them, and it's my duty to execute the mission, vision, and values established by the board through the strategic plan, who ultimately is elected by the community. And so when we typically come to you and other board members about key initiatives that cost money, obviously it's important to communicate the what we want to do, the why we want to do it behind it, but then we also share what we believe will be our predicted outcomes, and that's the ROI, that you were speaking about. And when it comes to student outcomes, there's a multitude of factors that each and every single purchase really allows us to magnify the student's experience and the student's outcomes. And so, for example, in my 7 years of serving as the superintendent of the school district, our graduation rate on time has grown by 36%. When I first took this job, it was in the low 60s as a school district. And now, as you know, this year we're celebrating, our highest graduation rate in school school district's history at 92%. And so when we're putting these things together, we speak specifically about how we think it will improve outcomes. I know that, a lot of our listeners and a lot of our communities are in the business and professional world, and they see school districts and think that it should be run more like a professional business and less like, a social, wellness type institution.
I want to touch on that a little bit because I did look into this a little bit, comparing a $40 million business to a similar sized private business.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got about 300 employees in this district, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And my observation is that you are running, a fraction of the C-suite or director type level people to keep 300 people busy and employed as a private business would.
For sure.
That's really impressive, actually.
Well, thank you. And we've got a great team and a great group of people who are doing, double the work ultimately to accomplish these results. But I mean,
it appears very lean. You've got a relatively small group operating a pretty large business.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, think about, what would a $40 million private company have when it comes to human resources and businesses and communications and all of these things. And really, we're a team of what I would consider to be 7 people doing all of that, trying to, accomplish that. And, as people who are very familiar with the private sector and think of us as people who should act as a private sector, the thing that private companies make is they make products and they have outcomes. They look at their investments into machinery to, produce more widgets, or they, produce a certain product. And for us, our widget or product is young human beings. And while that's tough to measure, I think our school district has done a great job of really trying to quantify the production of student outcome results. And so, we measure, when we talk about investments, we measure the return on investment when it comes to college and career ready. We measure that with on-time graduation rate. We measure that with students who are being served in our special education department and their on-time graduation. One of the things that I think is really cool to share is that when you look at like industry standards, our outcomes in the Estacada School District are greater than the state average in most, industry standards. When it comes to our reading and writing test scores, we're above the state average in the states if you want to compare industry standards.
Those are huge accomplishments. And that's, I've been on maybe just over a decade, and I know things were going great, but this board is so diverse in expertise.
Yes.
This district is diverse, great leadership. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of is how much work has been done to clean all those things up the last decade.
Yep, absolutely.
Whether it be transparency, grad rates, test results, right sizing the business for the size district we are. Just a lot of great work's been done.
Yeah.
It's been fun to be a part of it. And ultimately, we have no choice. There is no other choice other than investing in our kids, because they're stepping in when we step out.
Yeah.
You can say college, career ready, all these things, but bottom line is it's the future. So the growth is coming. The growth is here. We have no choice but to be a part of it and invest in their future, which ultimately takes care of our future.
Yeah, well, and the growth is a great topic to talk about too, because we know that even in our local community, there's a lot of controversy around that growth. And, not only are we trying hard to make sure that we communicate our return on investment on taxpayer money with outcomes, but we're also trying to participate in making sure that Estacada continues to be a thriving community. And I know, Joe, you and I, get told all of the time in the grocery store or at the track or at the baseball field or other places where we're very visible, we hear people's opinions about growth and, what they believe in that. But at the end of the day, as the superintendent of this school district, I've got to be honest, and maybe you agree with me or not, but I want our students who graduate from this school district to return back to this community to buy a house and raise their families and, put their kids back into our school system. And I think the thing that often gets overlooked about growth in the community is we have more and more people who are alumni of Estacada High School who are now starting to move back. And it's not reasonable to think that they can live in the basement of their original parents' house.
Yeah, who doesn't want their kids to come back?
Well, I want my kids to always live here, right? But
I want my kids to have a chance to come back.
Absolutely.
It's just not possible unless there's more places.
Unless they live.
I don't want them in my basement either.
I don't want them in my basement.
Close, but not that close.
For sure. And I'm with you. And so that requires them to buy a new home in one of our communities and raise their family in our school district. And so even though growth, has different opinions, one of the things that should be celebrated is that we're creating a thriving community where our own children are starting to return back to it. And so, that's one of the things that we're facing in growth and capacity is people returning back home to put their kids back into the system. And I think that that's something that we all can get behind and support.
I totally agree. And as a reminder, there's something that what we can't do is stop people from buying land that's zoned a certain way, that have, proper permitting and financial backing to develop land, right? That's not our business. So we can't necessarily go down there and stop it, even if we didn't like it. So you can either participate in it and help shape it, or be upset about it.
Amen.
So and I say we shape it.
And I, no doubt about it. And I also hear, and I know you hear too, like, why doesn't the school district, communicate to the city or communicate to, other people responsible for growth that like we can take no more people? What's been your interpretation of like the school district saying, stop, like no more people growing?
Of hearing that?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think my interpretation is we can't stop it.
Right. That's correct. We can't legally.
And, I want us to grow.
Yeah.
It goes back to we want our own families to come back.
Yeah.
It's impossible if we don't grow.
Yeah.
But in order to grow, we have to invest in this place.
Yeah.
We've tried a few times.
Yeah.
We've got to get there at some point.
Yeah.
But we have got to right size the facility for our new batch or new size of community we've got.
Yep, no doubt about it. And as these new housing developments, come in, obviously, the city has codes too, and they're not even legally able to say no unless the housing development proposal like is in violation of one of the codes or in violation of one of the zones. You are so involved in our community, as am I. And aside from being the superintendent, I also serve on the city's planning commission, and I serve as the chair currently of the city's Economic Development Commission. And the thing I've learned through that process is when someone comes to that commission, with a 400 home development, it's not like we even have the legal authority to be like, no, we don't want you to come here. We don't want the growth. It's, do they meet this? Do they meet this? Do they meet this? Yes, then we have to let them in.
Yeah, and maybe we can all agree on this, but I think, if people have property, they can do what they want with it legally, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's part of why we live here too, is to exercise our rights and freedoms to use our land for what it's for.
Yeah, amen to that. And I agree. And so therefore the school district also has the legal obligation to serve every single child who walks in our door. We don't get to say, oh, are you from that new development? Like, no, we can't take you. We're full. We have to take everybody who comes in. And so it's definitely growing pains, that we're all experiencing. But, from the financial perspective and, the waste, fraud, and abuse perspective, like we really have the school district has no say or authority in what we can allow or not allow when it comes to growth.
Yeah. And also to touch back on what we can and can't do.
Yeah.
There's a great data point you gave me yesterday back to this federal piece.
Yeah.
6% of our funding is federal.
Yes,
right?
It is.
I want to make sure that was out there, that all the news that's out there, doesn't matter where you get it. We're talking about 6% of our bottom line And
if our federal funding is frozen through the actual DOGE process.
And to date, correct me if I'm wrong, but the state hasn't communicated to this district that anything is going away.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. And we follow state law.
Yeah.
And so it's tough to spend too many calories on what's going to happen, what's maybe going to happen. Ultimately, nothing's happened.
Yep.
And so, the name of this podcast was, the
DOGE
waste,
and the
fraud, and abuse,
Estacada School
but it's
District.
really a non-starter yet.
Yeah.
And it's all clickbait right now.
Yeah.
So I think right now our district's in great shape. And again, we're talking about potentially, if everything went away, 6% of our operating income.
Yep, that's correct. And really the money that we get from the federal government or the Department of Education, which we know is in the process of closing, is we get some money to serve and support students in special education. And we get money to serve and support students who, are learning English as their second language, titled, ELL students, and then also for low income kids and supporting their reading. But the money we get of the $47 million we're talking about from the government really represents about 6% of that whole thing, like you talked about. And so, we're in a financially healthy place. And by the way, those things, if they were to go away, we just need to do them because it's the right thing to do to serve that specific demographic of kid. And so while the money allows us to hire more people to serve and support that problem, if that money were to go away, the requirement on us to still serve and support that kid does not go away. And
that's a great point. We wouldn't want to stop doing
absolutely.
that. And we would find a way to do it.
Yeah. And you talked about financial health, which I think is so important because I think this is our great last thing to talk about in this first podcast is really how are we doing with taxpayer dollars? And, right now, if this year were to end, which we're 24 days away from the end of the school year, if you could imagine that when we shoot this podcast, but in 24 days, if everything goes according to our financial budget planning, if we hit the bullseye, we're going to end with about a 10 or 11% end fund balance, which is critical because we want the people to know that, based on governmental efficiency, the state's board that kind of oversees this, school districts need to fall between a 5% and a 15% end fund balance. And so really that puts us in an extremely financial healthy position in order to start the next school year with still money in our savings account, able to handle any emergencies.
And we typically target high for a couple of reasons. Well, the number one reason being we don't know what's going to break around here tomorrow.
That's exactly right.
So it's one thing to carry over some nice budget for planning in the next year, but we're in a space where we've got to deal with what breaks daily, weekly.
Yes.
And when those things aren't breaking, we can zero in on our plan, for the level 4s and level 5 type repairs that we've got a running list of all these repairs and they're ranked 1 to 5 and we try to tackle those in the cracks. And so we typically target a bigger end fund balance for that reason.
Yep. Amen. So after we pay our employees and after we pay the lights and electricity, whatever money is left over is what's left over to tackle some of those multi-million-dollar projects, which we don't have multi-million dollars to chip away at. But the other thing I wanted to just share and talk about too is that, in school districts surrounding us, really every school district in the state of Oregon, for the most part, with the exception of us, is also laying off millions of dollars worth of people. And some of that stems from during COVID, the federal government gave every school district and every private company, some ESSER funds or some federal funds to keep people working and to keep our schools open and safe. And one of the brilliant things that we did, and when I say we, it was you and the school board and myself, as well as our great leadership team, really made an intentional decision that we knew this was going to be one-time, grant funding. And so we decided intentionally we were not going to hire any people with this federal, grant one-time money. We were going to purchase things to help keep us open, help keep us safe, and use it as an opportunity to modernize some of our outdated classrooms and structures and, just updated classrooms to meet the new age technology needs and the new age learner. And so now that federal money is gone, the school districts that have hired people with that, they now have to lay them off. I just heard of a school district yesterday that laid off 60 employees because of those federal funds. And, because of that, and because of great financial health, and because of great oversight from our school board members, and a strategic plan to keep us anchored to making sure we execute the mission, vision, and values, we're in a spot with our growth where we're adding people while other school districts are laying significant people off. And I just wanted to commend you as a school board member, as well as our school board team, for really keeping a disciplined oversight of how we use taxpayer dollars and federal dollars ultimately to keep our school district healthy.
We've got a great board, I think I said it earlier, it's diverse in every way.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people in construction, manufacturing, banking, large business, small business.
Yeah.
And, with your recommendations to spend the money this way, we're in a great position. And now as we're growing, unfortunately, some of those other districts letting people go has got you in a great position to keep us right-sized and staffed properly with some of that.
Here's a cool statistic. We just opened up a second grade open teaching position because we need to add another teacher because of the growth. And within 24 hours, we had 22 qualified applicants apply for that one position. And
that tells you a lot,
Absolutely.
Go back several years, how many people would apply for a second grade position out here?
4.
Yeah, we've managed to get more competitive and bring in the talent and, not settle.
Yeah.
Hire the right people, take the time to get the right people.
Yep.
And now they're flooding into you.
Now they're coming in. They're all extremely talented. And this, first of all, just the national recognition and the outcomes and the return on investment that we've been able to regularly demonstrate, now we're able to guarantee to our community that the teachers we're hiring right now are supreme. And they're 5-star people with great qualifications, in some cases, great experiences. And that's just only going to make us continue to thrive as a school district.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Director Burman, for coming on today and really just sharing, how we as a school district and how you as a school board member really, with a big magnifying glass, oversee our finances to make sure that every taxpayer is really getting their dollars worth as we try to maximize the local education of this school district and try to create that thriving community where kids want to come back and continue to reinvest into our great school district. DOGE is a hot topic. Final question. I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your opinion on the national DOGE issue? DOGE issue.
I'll keep it simple. I think we can all agree that fraud and waste is bad.
Yep.
I haven't met anyone that says, I'd love some fraud and waste. I'd love to pay someone to not produce. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's like, it's an easy topic to get on board with. And I'll throw out there, this isn't the first time it's happened. Many administrations do the very same thing.
Yep, no doubt about it.
And ultimately, just we're focused on like our school district's dollars, but those are our dollars nationally too. So
yes, they are.
It's always good to keep looking, hold people accountable, keep the audits up. Yeah. Which I'll add, we have a pretty clean bill of health and multiple
absolutely.
clean audits in this
for
district.
2 years in a row, we've received state and national recognition for a clean audit inside our school district. And so,
I love our transparency.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look, it's there on the website. You can find what the district spends on everything.
Yes.
It's there. So I believe we've always been really transparent.
Yeah.
If you're willing to go look.
Yep, absolutely.
And kind of a side note, I happen to be in the epicenter of the growth in Zone 5.
Yes, you do.
So just throwing it out there that any folks in that new development area, the Zone 5 goes basically from here all the way to Eagle Creek on the side of the highway. And cuts through all those developments. And I'm your representative. Reach out.
Yeah.
But we're glad you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Director Burman has been an excellent representative of the growing neighborhoods that's coming through. And I think, as you hear, your, belief and values around, the hot DOGE topic, and what you just said about your articulation of it, I think just makes you, positioned so well to use those values that you talked about to make sure that your local school district is doing the best that it can with the money that it is. And your superintendent also shares the same values that you just shared as well. I also live in this community. And so, not only are you looking at it from, a supervisory perspective, but you're also looking at it because you are personally invested into this school district and are totally committed, as well as I, into the success of this great school district. So
we have to do this. It's our future. We have to invest. And we have to keep an eye on those investments.
Yep. Absolutely. And so I hope this is helpful to the people who are, still with us in our first podcast. Again, we wanted to transparently communicate that, we take very seriously how we spend each dollar. We try our very best to be transparent about it. As people talk about governmental waste and fraud, we know that anytime, if that were to occur in the school district, that really that erodes the trust that we have with our community as well. And our trust is the one currency that we care so deeply about. And we want our community to trust us each and every single day to, just grow these great children who are growing inside the Estacada School District. And so we value that trust, which is also why we value the, oversight and authority and really combing through every single line item of our budget to make sure that we're doing and spending every dollar that is in alignment with our community's values. And so thank you so much for coming today. And we'll see you again in the next couple weeks for episode 2 of Office Hours. Thanks again.